Awesome. Welcome everyone to SVK Media Network. Today's International Women's Day, and you know what? What a great day to have our guest on the show, or butcher expert, ninja, rockstar. Hey, Elise.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
All right. So I want to talk before we get into chopping up that big chuck flat. Is it a chuck flat? Did I say that right?
It is.
It's chuck flat. Before we get into that, let's talk a little bit because you've been a butcher for a long time. I did a little creeping on you, and that's what happens. So I want to talk a little bit about has it been an easy ride to be a woman butcher, and at your status, you're one of the best in the country. It's got to be pretty hard and rewarding.
Yeah, you know what? Like, obviously, I started a very long time ago, and I was very young. I trained in the UK for my family. A lady butcher actually married into my farming family, and then we set up a butcher shop. And she taught me everything I needed to know. And she was a fourth generation butcher in her family. Like her dad, granddad, her brothers were all butchers, so it was kind of her life. And yeah, you know what? Like at first, it was easy because I was working for my family. And, you know, everyone kind of knew who I was already. But then when I kind of moved away from the family and worked in a different butcher shop, you know, you'd get the old, I'd come out of the back and they'd be like, okay, I know I need the butcher. Not. And I'm like, well, I'm the only butcher here, so you're going to have to get me, you know. And like, it never bothered me. Like, it was not something I was like, oh, this industry is like so bad. I always just felt like I just need to prove myself and then they'll know I'm a butcher. I don't look like a butcher, you know. I don't look like and maybe the stereotypical butcher is the big jolly guy with the big meat stained apron and all the knives down his sides. Do you know what I mean? Like they don't often look like me with big dangly earrings. But I feel like it's changed. It has changed over the years. You know, like I moved to Canada 11 years ago and I never intended to get back into butchering the way I did in the UK. My boys were young. We kind of just moved to a new country and I just fell back into it immediately. And the one thing I realized was actually the skills that I have as a butcher were very, very much valued here. Like kind of people were like, oh my goodness, you're a butcher. You're amazing. You can do these things. And the fact that I'm a seam butcher, which means that you only use hand tools to cut everything, is even more valuable because you have hunters, you have people who want to do it at home, you have people who want to do it in their restaurants. Like you want people who they want my skills and they were like, can you teach them to me? And I was like, oh, sure, why not? And then, and then it's got easier, I would say, in the last 5 years, 10 years, maybe, I don't know. So social media, like we never had a place, like I would never have posted a picture of anything.
Serious?
Well, when Facebook first started and Instagram, like I've been on, my kids laugh at me because I've been on Instagram since it started. They said like I'm an old age pensioner in the terms of Instagram world. But I would never post something raw because I would be worried what people would say. I'd be worried that's gross, that's horrible, because there is a disconnect. People don't necessarily want to know that their meat was once alive. Like I had a friend once and she was afraid to tell her children that chicken nuggets were actually chickens. And I was like, well, that's
serious?
Well, yeah, because she thought they would stop eating them because it was once alive. And I was like, no, that's the very thing we should be teaching them. So, you know, there was a very famous Jamie Oliver program in the UK and he was asking school children where milk came from. And like they were saying, well, the supermarket. And he's like, yes, but it comes from a cow. And they were like, no, it doesn't. That's gross. And it's like, oh my goodness, what are we teaching people? So social media kind of changed. And, you know, chefs were the cool ones for a very long time. And then butchers, we've kind of become cool. Like the last few years, it's cool to be a butcher. You know, it's cool to be pictures of meat. It's cool to kind of be looking badass. Like that picture of me holding my knife over my shoulder. I don't think I would have posted that on social media when it first came around because they probably would have thought I was a serial killer or something. Whereas now, it's kind of cool. So we have that community and there is a very big community of lady butchers out there. We all talk. We're all kind of like... Yeah, so there's actually an Instagram account called... What's it called? Anyway, it's for butchers basically, and it's like the big butcher family, and we kind of host things. And I actually hosted a kind of week where it was just all female butchers doing interviews across the whole of their kind of social media platform. So there is somewhere that you can kind of reach out to and say, this happened to me today. And like, it's funny because we have kind of like one of the things that butchers, and it's not necessarily just women, it's just people who are maybe shorter in stature. A lot of the butcher world isn't quite set up for us. So for me, when I was younger, our meat used to hang on rail system above us. And come off the rails, like off the hook. And I wasn't really tall enough, so I'd be on my tiptoes all of the time. So my calf muscles were massive when I was younger. I had to stand on my tiptoes. So we had this whole conversation about how everybody copes, and like an upturned milk cart like crate is how a lot of people cope, because it's just. And then I worked at a processing plant out in Tofield, which is east of Edmonton. And I actually couldn't use their rail system because it was too tall for me as it ran down the bottom. Like it was
serious.
Yeah. So I couldn't actually use.
What'd you do? So what'd you do? Did you get stilts?
No, because you are bringing down like either a whole side of beef, and it's too heavy because you couldn't be stood on something because it comes down a hill and then turns a corner and then comes down to where the block is.
Wow.
So like drops.
Oh, okay.
I just couldn't use that rail system. I had to get somebody else to do it for me. So the journey to being a butcher, I don't think is difficult. You just have to overcome a few things, and you have to be prepared for people to go, "You're not a butcher," and then you go, "I am a butcher. I'll show you." And things like that. And you might have to stand on a step as well. But that's probably the only thing in the butcher world I can't do is I can't reach things, and that's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yes.
It's done.
Yeah, that's it. So
done.
yeah.
Done.
Yeah, I think in Canada, only 12% of meat cutters are female. And
that's it?
Yeah. Wow. I was looking at the stats, and I was surprised. And I think it's changing though. I think there are
I do.
Yeah. Like the World Butcher Challenge, obviously Team Canada competed in the competition last year for the first time. We have 2 females on our team. So myself and then Taryn Barker of the Butcher out in BC. And the other teams, there was quite a lot of females on the other teams as well. And quite a lot of females in the apprenticeship competition and the junior competition. So I think our industry is changing. I think the idea of the female butcher is becoming just more of a normal one. Like it's.
I think you guys are breaking ground, and I know Taryn, and Taryn used to do a show with us, and I tell you what you guys do, and the knowledge you bring, and everything else, it's just incredible. So I love it. I absolutely love what you guys do. I love that you're changing the industry, and
cool.
You're getting rid of that, like you said, that stagnant guy that we all recognize and remember.
Yeah, where's sparkly earrings?
Yeah, exactly. we're gonna.
It's not. I'm not going to lie though. It is a physically demanding job, and like any job that requires you to kind of lift heavy things, work very hard. Like there was, I kind of got out of butcher for a while when we first moved here, and someone called me up and asked me if I'd go and help out at a processing plant, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I was determined I was going to make a good impression on them, because the gentleman on the phone call that I was talking to was like, are you sure you're a meat cutter? I was like, yeah. And he was like, are you sure? Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And my dad wanted me to turn up in like a dress and my heels and my knives in my handbag.
Serious?
I'm not doing that, no way. But I was determined I was going to work incredibly hard. So I kind of, I busted it all day. I worked super hard. I'm kind of cutting and doing everything. And I got in the car and my fingers were so sore because I was like out of butcher fit, and I was like, I could barely grip the steering wheel of the car. I was like, oh my goodness. So it is a physically demanding job. So yeah, like women are perfectly capable of doing it. I think I hate it when I read these articles with lady butchers and they're like, oh yeah, women are better at being butchers and we're amazing. We are, but I don't think we're better. We just bring a different mindset to it. Maybe we bring perspective, bring a different kind of, sometimes finesse, maybe a little bit of a different way of thinking.
A little finesse.
A little bit, but I'm not saying guys don't have finesse in the butcher world, because oh my goodness, do they ever. I saw it.
They do. I saw that. Yeah.
I saw it in that butcher competition. Like, there is some flipping talented butchers around the world. Like, don't get me wrong. So I never think that we're not better at this job, but we are every bit as good as anybody else.
I love that.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go. There you go. That's it. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that, because I am sincerely blown away. What you do, just that last show we did, just blew me away. Just your knowledge and everything about, and the energy you bring to Butchery, and to knowing so much about proteins blows my mind, first of all. And working with Taryn over 2 years and getting to know her, and Talia rocks. You guys are bringing a different perception, or not even just that, a different viewpoint that is very cool in not only in Butchery, but into food service as well, as we connect today's show about, and to show the cuts. So thank you for all those amazing things you guys do. I think it's amazing. So cool stuff. So so first of all, Rockstar, I called you the goat the other day on social. Like, honestly, like, look, like, do you imagine what you're going to be doing in like 10 years? You're going to be like couple Olympics. It's called the Olympics, right? Is it Olympics, Butchery, or the world champion?
Yeah, it's called the World Butcher Challenge, but it's referred to as the Butcher Olympics.
Yeah, you're gonna win that. You're gonna win that. I see it.
Yeah, the team actually gets together in a couple of weeks' time. We're flying into Ontario to get together to start the process all over again, ready for next year.
There is.
Yeah.
How long does that take? Like 2 years to get ready?
Yeah. Competitions every 2 years. So yeah.
2 years. 2 years to get ready. That's crazy. Well, we'll have to do a show on that whole thing, because that's mind blowing as well. But let's talk a little bit about that meat before we get into that big chunk of chuck flat. I'm going to run this thing about our RC show that's coming up in April, and then we'll be right back with the goat, the protein, the goat. There you go.
Been through a whole lot, but we overcome. Enemies in our face, but we ain't gon' run. Never drift off course, always stay on mission. Won't slow us down, cause we way too driven. Yeah, we put in these 10,000 hours. You won't stop us, cause we got the power. Whole world is watching, and I hope they ready. From here on out, we are legendary. We ain't going nowhere. We'll be standing right here until the end of time. Till the end of time. We ain't going nowhere.
You know what? The commercial always gets me, because it just cuts right off. And I'm never ready for it. It just stops dead. Anyways, it's cool. So Elise, what are we doing here with this chuck flat today?
Okay, so this is kind of like, it's one of those, it's not new. Nothing's new on a cow. All the muscles have always been there. We just think about them very differently, particularly from when I first trained as a butcher, because we use a bit of science in our kind of beef meat world, all kind of meat. Like, we use science now. So I talked about it in the last show a little bit. It's the shear force test that's used to test how tender meat is. And they do kind of like, it's called the National Beef Tenderness Survey. I think the last one was in 2015, where they kind of look at the cuts and say, okay, maybe we've been thinking about this all wrong. And this is kind of one of those cuts. So it comes from the shoulder of the cow. So the shoulder works very hard. So cows are grazing animals, their heads are down, they're kind of like forward heavy. So the front end of their body works a lot harder. So that means more flavor. So cuts like this, like the chuck flat, the flat iron, they come from that kind of shoulder area, which in the past, as butchers, we were kind of like, that was going in your burgers, that was going in the ground beef, we were making it into stew beef. You would use that chuck eye roll, which is that kind of continuation of the strip loin muscle all the way into the shoulder for kind of braising, but you weren't making that into a steak. So it's basically the lip of the chuck eye roll. So it's kind of coming down. It's an area called the underblade. So it's underneath the shoulder blade, basically. So it's tender and it has a really good beefy flavor because it's in that front end of the cow, so it's working a little bit harder. So this muscle here is called the serratus ventralis muscle, okay? And it kind of combines these hard working area muscles that don't work that hard. So it's basically like if you haven't done a specific sport for a while, you go out and you have a really good day and you play this sport, and then the day after you've pulled some muscle that you didn't know existed, okay? Because it's not a muscle that you use very often. So these muscles are in a hard working area, but the cow doesn't use them very much, which means tender but good flavor, okay? So this is the chuck flat. So this kind of area, the underblade, is also where you would find the Denver steak. So it's kind of a little bit bigger than this. But this is a Denver, basically. Okay.
So this is a Denver steak. Because I remember doing some research way back in the day, because I've been doing this for a while. Is that the Denver steak? I always wondered because on a menu, there's also, if I recall this right, is there the Kansas City steak or Kansas steak?
Oh, very probably. So I actually looked up why it was called a Denver steak. And I couldn't find any actual reason as to why it was called the Denver steak. So I kind of feel like what happens a lot of the time is a steakhouse or a location, they kind of steak and they go, oh, this is this. And they've kind of made that name up. And I kind of feel like that's what happened with the Denver.
You know what it was, at least? It was KC steak, KC beef or something like that was on a menu. And it was actually Kansas City beef is what they had. That's what there was a KC. So I'm sure Denver is something about that as well.
Yeah. So basically all we're doing is this is how they come, just like they were, and I'm just trimming them up a little bit. So again,
so they come in a 3-pack, like for us, we sell them in a 3-pack.
Absolutely do.
Okay, cool.
It's very little trimming, very little waste. It's an incredibly good steak to use and incredibly versatile as well. So this steak can be used, obviously you can cut it as a Denver steak, which I'll show you in a second. You can also cut it thin as long as you are going against the grain of the meat. So the grains of the meat are kind of running this way. So as long as you slice it that way against the grain, which is the same for like a flank steak, it's incredibly tender as well. So you can use this as like a boneless short rib. You can marinate it. You can fry it. You can braise it. Like it behaves very, very similar to a brisket. So it's perfect for smoking. Like it's perfect for slow cooking. Like if you in the restaurant world are looking for a piece of beef that's going to be excellent braised and easily portionable into the right sizes, you can't get much better than this. It comes in these perfect little rectangles because that's kind of how it's. And it's like one of those steaks that I'm always surprised that people don't use it more than they do. It's one of my favorites. I absolutely love it. So I'm just taking the silver off the top. So we always say silver in the butcher world, and I always assume people know what we mean. But the silver is basically it's connective tissues. So it's thin layers of connective tissues, basically, just on the outside of the muscle.
And it will never cook out. Is that right? You can't cook out silver?
You'd have to cook it for an incredibly long time to actually get it to be, so it's not the consistency of chewing gum. Because that's just how it is. It will break down eventually. Like this stuff here, if it feels soft like this, it will break down eventually. If it feels like tough, then no, it's never going to break down and you just want to take it out. So we're just going to get rid of the silver off the back of here.
So at least does the flat come in a different format than ours look nice and neat and very simple. Is there other ways that people sell this product in the marketplace that people need to be aware of, or do they always come like that?
Well, you can buy the whole shoulder, which is sometimes referred to as a clod. It's like
yeah.
The chuck eye roll. It's everything kind of down. It's that whole kind of shoulder area. These muscles here, like I say, they're underneath the shoulder blade. So inside of that shoulder blade area, you have this, and then you have the flat irons, which we're going to cover on another show coming soon, because it's also a really, really excellent steak. Like this, an underused muscle, but in that area where there's just flavor. Yeah. So there we go. So this is now trimmed up. So I just took all the silver off the back, so that connective tissue across the back of there. I just took the little pockets of fat just under, and you can see here, these are the areas where like this, there's just a little bit of fat, but you can see how much marbling is already in there.
Yeah. Can you bring it closer to the camera?
Yeah.
Bring it up here, because you can see that I can actually see the marbling from here. Look at that.
Delicious, yeah? So like fat is
Pretty
flavor.
cool.
And also this muscle has worked harder. So it already has that flavor in there, you know, like all of that chain down the back, the muscle chain where the ribeye and the strip loin is, it does work, but not hard, not as hard as these shoulder muscles. But again, this is in like a little pocket that doesn't work as hard, but so you have the benefits of the flavor, a more beefy flavor. That's what you get from a muscle working, just beefier, nicer flavor. So we're going to cut what would be a Denver steak for you. So there is.
What?
So technically, it should be bigger. If the whole Denver is a slightly bigger kind of area, okay, and it actually kind of comes in almost like a triangle, and you kind of have to square one side off so that you can get these nice kind of. You need to follow that. The grain lines go this way, so you have to cut it that way, because if you cut the steak the wrong way and go with the grain, not against the grain, it will be tough. And it almost defies logic that it's the same piece of meat, but if you just cut it differently, it's tough. And it's the way those connective chains sit in those muscles. So you always go against the grain. So flank steak, lines go this way, you slice it the opposite way. So the line's this way, and then you slice it this way. So the same with this one. And then also this, so if you were doing, say, like a boneless short rib, this is perfect, but you can cut it into very thin slices. So if you're looking for sort of like a Korean barbecue, kind of like get some bulgogi sauce on there, but you can see it has to be cut nice and thin though, like so. So you can cut it thin. So it's kind of perfect. Like, honestly, it would be amazing in fajitas, it would be amazing in a steak sandwich, like so many applications. But then braising it pulls apart like a brisket does when it's been cooked perfectly. It's the same kind of area. The brisket is just lower down into the plate area, under, like down the front towards the bottom, whereas this is kind of the midpoint. So chuck eye roll at the top, coming down here into this area here where the flat iron and the chuck flat is, and then down the bottom is kind of where that brisket is.
Yeah.
Here. Yeah.
So I did my research team has told me that the Denver steak, because in 2000, what year was it? In the early 2000s, they were looking at inexpensive primal cuts to bring into the marketplace. This is in the early part of 2000s. And they did a program, the Cattlemen's Beef in the States did this, and we're looking for cheaper cuts of meat coming from the chuck primal area, right? So they did a study about this. They trained butchers to obtain these new steaks. These were new steaks from the chuck. They were actually such a great quality that they could sell them at a premium price, but have a less cost. Kind of cool. And it was actually just a marketing tactic. It's not.
Yeah, totally.
It's not omelet.
So yeah, like I think in the early 2000s. Oh, you're breaking up a little bit. I don't know if that's me or if that's you.
You think?
Oh. Yeah, I can't tell what you're saying now. I'm going to talk because I don't know what the question was. Then I can't quite hear it. But yes, so the beef industry remarketed, if you like, the front.
Internet, all right. Yeah.
I feel like your internet's gone all crazy at your end. Okay, I'm just going to keep talking then. Okay, so yes, the beef industry, I think it was, I don't know, in the early 2000s, they basically said, okay, how can we make more steaks out of a cow? So they looked at those shear force tests as to which muscle groups are tender and tasty. And that's kind of part of that whole National Beef Tenderness survey done. They're always looking at new ways to market the whole cow, because nose to tail eating, obviously it's not a new way of thinking. It's been around for a very long time, and the whole cow is there for the using, and it's up to us to make sure we use every part of it to the best of our ability. So if there are more steaks in there, then go for them. You know, like I would never choose a tenderloin on a menu because it has the least flavor of any steak. I would always go for a Denver, a flat iron, a flank steak. You know, those ones that just have more beefy flavor. And science has helped us kind of discover those, I guess, because like I said, this is something I would have cooked for stew when I was 17 years old as a just newly out of training butcher. Like 100%, I would not have been thinking that this is a steak. I would have told my customer they were crazy if they said they were going to grill this. Whereas now we know, actually, it's pretty darn good.
So give us some tips on how you would grill that, please.
Oh, yeah. So like this, obviously, I'm just seasoning this up and I'm just cooking this in a searing hot pan. Same rules as I said last time.
No pepper until after.
You can put pepper on, but only afterwards so that you don't burn it.
Exactly.
But yeah, searing hot grill, put that on. These are absolutely delicious. Like these thin strips here, like I'm going to put these in some Asian marinade right now. And then you're just going to fry these up again over a hot barbecue, over a hot skillet on the pan, kind of just sear them up until they've got a little bit of color on the outside, and then just delicious.
What's your doneness on this? What would you cook a flat iron to? What would you do and what wouldn't you do?
I would go slightly more than I would do on, say, a strip or a ribeye, only because you do need to give a bit more heat to break down some of that.
Serious?
Just a tiny bit. Like I still want it pink in the middle, but you know, I'm not against cooking a strip loin like a ribeye till it's black and blue. So like outside, and so a good vet could still revive it on the inside. I would go a tiny little bit more on a steak like this. Again, not too much. Like I'm talking maybe a few more degrees on the temperature probe. Actually, that's my other top tip. Get yourself a good temperature probe and cook it to a temperature. I know that you can do that whole thing where you use the back of your hand, and if it's there, it's rare. You pay good money for steak. Everybody pays good money for steak because it's an expensive commodity that we are using. We are guessing if we don't judge the temperature. There's a very famous chef in the UK, and he basically says every other part of cooking, we test it. We're baking a cake, we have a timer. If we have, I don't know, any other thing, you test it. You put your cake tester in to make sure it's all the way through. Meat, we're just kind of guessing if you don't go to a temperature. So, you know, like you want to be going to I don't know off the top of my head, but if you Google it, it will tell you 100%. Medium is this temperature. Medium rare is this temperature. You know, well done. We're not even going to discuss that. Go to a temperature. You know, don't keep stabbing the meat every 2 seconds while it's cooking in the pan, but just test it and then rest it. You have to rest your steak, especially with these ones, because they're a hard-working steak. They'll hold on to that. If you just cut them straight away, all of that myoglobin will just leach out onto the plate, and then all of the juiciness will have gone out of your steak. You've got to let it rest so that the juices redistribute through the steak so that it is just juicy all the way through and then not in a puddle on your plate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
Yeah. But yeah,
well done.
It is one of my top recommendations. It is so multi-purpose. Like if you had a case of this in your fridge right now, you can braise it, you can grill it, you can use it as a steak. It is like, I don't know, it's like the butcher duct tape of the meat world. You can just grab it and do anything with it pretty much. You know,
the butcher duct tape of the meat.
Like it's the one thing
that's great.
It can do so many things. So like if you are, you know, a restaurant and you are looking for something that is going to give you options, this is one of my top recommendations.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, at least for today, and in celebrating International Women's Day by teaching us everything about chuck flats. I'm blown away. Once again, you are the go-to protein. There you go.
Well, it's my pleasure to talk about these lesser known cuts.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Well, enjoy your steak. And to everyone else, we're back again later on today with a panel talk of 6 of the most top leading ladies in the industry on our show this afternoon at 3 p.m. So, Elise, all the best. Thanks so much for everything. I can't wait to have you back. We'll learn more about beef. And because I go out after and I brag what you tell me, people think I'm not smart. So I've been telling the pepper thing to everyone I've been meeting with. So thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks, Lise. And to everyone else, like I said, we're back again 3 p.m. later on today. And we'll see you then. All the best and have a great rest of your day. And don't forget to celebrate International Women's Day today. Bye-bye.